Now we're gonna make focaccia. Focaccia is one of those crowd-pleasing favorite things that you can serve with pasta or as an appetizer. You can do a lot of different things. Put your own stamp on this type of a recipe. This is something that my family asks for. This is a yeast bread. So we're going to start by adding some of our warm water to the mixer. We're also going to add some sugar. So the sugar works really well to give some food to the yeast so that it can bloom and rise to the top and get foamy. So we're just going to add our yeast. Now at this point, we just need to mix this just so that all the yeast gets wet. Now we let it sit. So as it's sitting, the yeast is going to get wet and it's going to start to grow and it's going to get foamy and it's going to bloom and be ready for us to use. So let's work on our dry ingredients now. So now we have white rice flour, tapioca, starch. We're going to add some guar gum. Again, guar gum will make it thick, will make it sticky, and it'll give it a much better mouthfeel. We're going to add some salt. So like I said, the sugar gets the yeast going, the salt controls what the yeast does. We're also going to add some herbs. I really like adding basil and parsley, and I also like adding oregano. You can add whatever herbs work for you. Dill would work really well in this recipe, but whatever herbs you tend to like. So there we go. We're just going to mix this up a little bit. So I've just used a cookie sheet here, and I have put foil down because this bread does use a lot of oil. So we're just going to put some spray oil on here. And when we turn the dough out, we're going to be able to spread it very evenly over this nicely oiled foil. So I can see that my yeast has already started to bloom. The next thing we're going to do is get an egg. You should really always crack an egg into a bowl. That way you know that you haven't put any shell into it. So let's start this running. We're going to add our egg. Then we're going to start to add our dry ingredients. So we're going to alternate the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients. There's no need to be intimidated by a yeast bread. The yeast does all the work. You just have to make sure that the warm water that you use isn't too hot that it's going to kill the yeast before it really gets a chance to do its thing. And when the bread is proofing so that it's growing to double its size, you do want to remember nice warm beach, that type of warmth. And the yeast just loves that. So we're going to add the rest of our dry ingredients and the rest of our water. Then we're going to turn it up so that it can really get nice and smooth. Don't be too concerned if you have some lumps in this. We can turn the mixer up really high so that all the lumps go away. Now before we're finished, I want to put some oil in. I'm putting in a couple of tablespoons of oil. We're going to use a lot of oil in this recipe. If you want to use olive oil, you certainly can. Again, this is one of those recipes that you can make the way you like. If you like sun-dried tomatoes, you can chop those up finely and add them here, or you can use them as a topping. One of the really good things about gluten-free breads like this is that they only need one rise. If you were making this with wheat flour, you'd let it rise and you'd pound it down, you'd let it rise again. With gluten-free, it only needs to rise once. There we go. This dough now resembles a thick frosting. You certainly wouldn't want to handle it. It's much too thin for that. It smells really good though. Between the yeast and the herbs in here, really good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to spoon it out with the spatula onto this pan. And then we're going to flatten it before we let it rise. So just pretend that you're icing a cake. It's going to be a little sticky, but it is supposed to look a little rustic. And believe me, as it starts to rise, it will fill in the gaps. Try and get out to the corners if you can, but it's really not necessary. It doesn't need to be completely flat on top. And don't even worry if you end up with some holes in it. What we're going to do is we're going to put this in a warm place. I like to turn my oven on to preheat, and once it goes up to about 170 degrees, I turn it off and let it come down to about 100 degrees, sort of like a nice warm beach, and let it rise. So the focaccia is almost ready to go in the oven. As you can see, it's risen. While it was rising, I made a mixture of oil and minced garlic. You can use the minced garlic that you get at the grocery store, or you can mince your own. So we're going to do something really exciting with this now. So this has all come up and bubbled. And what we're going to do is stick our fingers in the oil, and we're going to make holes. I call them flavor wells throughout the focaccia. This is what sort of sets us apart from other breads. So we've got all our little flavor wells. Now we're going to take our mixture of garlic and oil, and we're going to fill those flavor wells. Lots of garlic. The house smells so garlicky right now. This is terrific. When this bread comes out of the oven, everybody knows it because you can smell the garlic from so far away. There's usually people waiting when it comes out of the oven. So I told you there was going to be lots of oil in this recipe. There we go. So now we've got the garlic and the oil as toppings, and now we're just going to put some herbs on. Again, you can use any herbs you want, and you can even use some sun-dried tomatoes on top if you'd like. Right now I think I'm using parsley and basil. The other thing I like to use is some Parmesan cheese on top. I've tried with the Parmesan cheese that you grate yourself, and it's still a little too moist. I like the drier Parmesan cheese, and it sort of goes crispy on top. So, this, with the flavor wells all filled, is now ready for the oven. I'm going to bake it at 400 degrees. So we're back, and we're ready to take the focaccia out of the oven. Oh, wow. Look at that. That is so good. I'm going to cut it right away. I usually cut it into like strips. Let me just try a piece right now. All that oil got sopped up by the different flours that we have. Oh, look how it's cooked on the bottom. It's nice and crispy. Oh, that is so, so nice. Now let me taste it. It's hot. The garlic comes through so nicely, and the herbs on top. This is a great accompaniment to pasta. It works really good as an appetizer too. And people know when dinner's ready because they can smell the garlic all over the house. This is an absolute crowd pleaser. You too can now bake gluten-free focaccia at home.